There's a person in your life right now, maybe a partner, a sibling, a close friend who comes home from work and says almost nothing. They eat dinner, they stare at their phone. And if someone pushes them on it, they say it's fine, just tired. This video is about what's actually happening inside that person's head. Most people think employees are just people doing jobs. Show up, complete tasks, collect a paycheck, repeat. The workplace is treated like a transaction. Labor for money, simple exchange. But here's what's strange. Researchers who study workplace psychology keep finding the same thing over and over. The mental world of someone inside an organization is radically more complex than anyone outside it can see. The strategies, the calculations, the emotional management happening underneath a completely neutral face. It's closer to a chess grandmaster mid-game than someone just clocking in. In the wildest part, most employees don't even realize they're doing it. What follows is a breakdown of the cognitive machinery running inside the mind of an ordinary employee. The mechanisms have real names backed by real research. And by the time this is over, that quiet person at dinner is going to make a lot more sense. Here's where to start, not with stress, not with burnout, but with something most people never think about. The performance happening before a single word is spoken. Irving Goffman, the sociologist, called it impression management. The idea that social life is a kind of theater, and every person is simultaneously an actor and an audience. But in the workplace, this isn't metaphorical. It becomes a daily cognitive load. Picture someone walking into a Monday morning meeting. Before they sit down, they have already scanned who's in the room, where the manager is positioned, who looks tense, who looks relaxed, and calibrated their own expression to match the register of the room. They didn't decide to do this consciously. It happened automatically. And it cost them energy, real, measurable energy. Research by Alicia Grandi, published in the Academy of Management Journal in 2003, introduced what's now called emotional labor, the effort required to manage internal feeling states to fulfill the emotional requirements of a job. Grandi found that this suppression, done repeatedly throughout a workday, directly depletes cognitive resources. The science calls this process surface acting, and it's exhausting in a way that's genuinely invisible to people who don't do it. That explains a lot about dinner. The silence, the distance. It isn't disinterest, it's depletion. But here's the twist. Not all emotional management drains people equally. And the distinction reveals something about how deeply an employee's identity becomes entangled with their role, sometimes without their permission. There are two kinds of emotional performance an employee does. Surface acting, where the face changes but the feeling doesn't. And deep acting, where the person actually works to convince themselves to feel the required emotion. Deep acting is more convincing. Managers prefer it. Organizations reward it without ever naming it. But Grandi's research and subsequent studies show something nobody tells you at orientation. Deep acting correlates with identity fusion. The longer someone performs a role deeply, the more they stop seeing where the role ends and they begin. The confident project manager who never loses their cool might genuinely believe that about themselves because they've performed it so many times it calcified into self-concept. This is where the stakes get real, because what happens when the role is threatened? When a person's work identity comes under attack, a bad performance review being passed over for a promotion, public criticism in a meeting, the threat is processed in the brain the same way a physical threat is processed. Naomi Eisenberger's neuroimaging research at UCLA showed that social rejection activates the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the same region that processes physical pain. The employee who took it really hard wasn't being sensitive. Their brain was treating it as injury. And here's where the employee's mind does something genuinely remarkable. Something most people couldn't do under that kind of pressure. It recalibrates. Within the same meeting, sometimes within the same breath, an experienced employee in a hostile environment will shift strategy in real time. This cognitive flexibility has a name: attentional control under threat. And it's not common. Most human brains under social threat narrow their attention, fight, flee, or freeze. But employees who have spent years navigating organizational politics develop what researchers call strategic emotional regulation. They learn to widen attention deliberately, to observe themselves observing, to stay present while under fire. It looks like composure. From the inside, it feels like controlled freefall. Adam Grant's research at Wharton on psychological safety and organizational behavior found that people in environments where mistakes are punished expend enormous cognitive resources on preemptive self-protection. Scanning emails for subtext, anticipating questions before meetings, rehearsing responses to comments that haven't happened yet. The brain becomes a threat prediction engine. And a threat prediction engine doesn't have much bandwidth left for creativity, honesty, or joy. This is the hidden cost of bad management. It's not just morale, it's actual cognitive architecture. Now here's something genuinely unexpected. The employees who survive those environments longest aren't always the most resilient. Sometimes they're the most adaptive in a way that looks like resilience but functions more like camouflage. They develop what psychologists call pluralistic ignorance, where everyone privately disagrees with a norm but assumes everyone else agrees, so nobody speaks. A research team thinks the strategy is flawed. Nobody says so. Everyone assumes everyone else is on board. The meeting ends with false consensus, and one person walks to their car knowing exactly what went wrong and choosing silence because the math said silence was safer. That's not cowardice. That's a calculated cognitive decision made under real organizational pressure by someone who has accurately modeled the social consequences of speaking. That calculation, performed in real time, is genuinely sophisticated. And yet it's the thing that eats at people for years. There's a mechanism called the Zygarnik effect, named for Soviet psychologist Bluma Zygarnik, who found that incomplete tasks occupy mental real estate far more persistently than completed ones. The unfinished conversation in the conference room, the email that was never sent, the thing that should have been said and wasn't. These don't disappear. They loop, they surface at 2 a.m. They color how someone moves through their next meeting and the one after that. Employees carry an invisible archive of unfinished psychological business, and most of the people in their lives have no idea it exists. So what does all of this add up to? The employee isn't someone who checks out at 5 o'clock. The employee is someone running a continuous, mostly unconscious simulation of an entire social ecosystem, tracking relationships, managing identity, regulating emotion, modeling threat, predicting behavior, and making calculated choices about what to reveal and what to protect. That quiet person at the dinner table went through something today that had nothing to do with the surface of their day. They managed someone else's mood. They absorbed a comment that landed wrong. They chose silence in a moment that cost them something. They came home already spent, carrying loops that won't close. Understanding this doesn't fix anything immediately, but it changes what the right question is. Not why aren't you talking, but what did it actually cost you today? The cognitive science got us here, but what stays isn't the terminology. It's the image of someone doing something genuinely difficult and complex, almost entirely alone inside a world that calls it just work. If this landed somewhere real, leave a word in the comments, even a small one. The people who work quietly in difficult places rarely get named. Maybe naming the experience is the beginning of something. There are more professions, more hidden minds to decode. The next one might be closer than expected.